What's up, everybody? Apparently, I offended half of you the other day on Twitter when I made a post about anonymous accounts. I don't exactly know why I did it, but I was thinking about how anonymous accounts kind of annoy me on Twitter, and so I fired off this tweet that basically said that anonymous accounts are stupid. And probably not the most judicious use of terminology that I've ever expressed in my life. It's not the best verbiage that I've ever produced in terms of my linguistic skills, calling them stupid. But man, did you ratio me back and punch back on that one. It's probably the most vociferous disagreement that I've ever garnered on social media, accepting probably only some of my takes on King James onlyism. I'm not a King James onlyist. I think the King James is great, but I think that there are other translations that are also wonderful. That position garners me a lot of heat on social media whenever I talk about that. This one too, I wasn't expecting it though, and so I was somewhat surprised to get all of the kickback, vociferous kickback, vehement kickback from many of you. And so I thought it would be good for me to maybe take a few moments to kind of clarify exactly what my viewpoint is in terms of anonymous accounts, especially on Twitter and Facebook and things like that. So what's up, everybody? My name is Matthew. I am one of the pastors here at Gospel Fellowship PCA. We are a Reformed Bible-believing church just north of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in a church like that, please come check us out. All right, so the first thing that people hit me back with, the first punchback, was that I was against freedom of speech. Now, I want to clarify that that is absolutely not true. Some of you suggested that I was DHS or Fed or something like that because I suggested that you should tell us who you are in your Twitter account so that your opinions can at least be considered from the perspective of who is the one originating that particular idea. You thought that was Fed on my part, and I want to clarify, no, that was not my primary motivation at all in putting out that tweet. I am very much a free speech advocate, almost a free speech absolutist. However, I do think that there are some things, for instance, direct threats or something like that. If I were to threaten an individual, or if I were to threaten a large group of people or something like that, obviously that should be illegal and restrained by the law. Aside from that, I am almost a free speech absolutist in the sense that I think citizens should be able to say whatever they want to say without any fear whatsoever. And not only that, but they should be able to do so either named or anonymously. I have no problem with that. So when I said that anonymous accounts were stupid, and again, probably not the best use of terms on my part, I was not in any way implying that you shouldn't have the right to have anonymous accounts. Of course, I think you should have the right to have anonymous accounts. Listen, man, if you want to be Reformed Captain America, if you want to be Calvinist Batman, if you want to be Reformed Captain Underpants 123 or whatever on Twitter, bro, make as many accounts as you want. Make 15 anonymous accounts as far as I'm concerned. I want you to have as many anonymous accounts as you can possibly enjoy. In fact, celebrate this video by going to create a few more anonymous accounts right now. I want you to have the freedom to do that. When I'm talking about anonymous accounts being largely stupid, and by the way, at the end of this video, I'm going to suggest a few anonymous accounts that I actually like, just to show you how cosmopolitan I actually am here in my viewpoints. What I was talking about primarily is what I think the greatest sin of anonymous accounts is that they're simply boring. They're uninteresting. We live in a world, of course, of bots. There are many, many bots that follow me on Twitter, and bots that like my posts, and bots that retweet the things that I post. Who knows why? I have no idea who creates bots or how they get progenited or whatever. But if your opinion is indistinguishable from a bot, then it makes your opinion very, very, it's just worth very little to me, okay? I have very little interest in the opinions of anonymous persons because primarily I can't distinguish them from a bot. So here's what I mean by that. Suppose you tweet off a great idea of yours, but you're anonymous. You say, and this is your best idea, Orange Man is bad, or the opposite. Orange Man is very good. Okay. Now I look at your account and it's like Reformed Captain Underpants 123, and I know nothing about you. Then your opinion is virtually worthless to me. I don't know who's saying this. It could be you, it could be somebody else, it could be somebody from China as far as I know. I have no interest in your opinion. However, if I look at that same tweet, Orange Man bad or Orange Man good, and I find out that you are the associate professor of apologetics at such and such a seminary or such and such a university, or you're the dean of the School of Psychology at some secular school or some community college, or maybe you're the head delivery guy at Pizza Hut or something. At least that's interesting to me. At least there is some sense in which I know who you are and why your opinion should matter to me. Perhaps you're a homeschooling mom of 7. Great. Okay, that's at least interesting. Perhaps you're a guy who I don't know. You're a logger. You cut down trees. You're a lumberjack. Okay, cool. Now that's something interesting to me. But as far as your anonymity goes, my interest level in your opinions goes down exponentially because, remember, A, I can't distinguish you from a bot, and B, I don't know why I should care about what you think. I just don't know. Any background information about you would help me to consider your opinion and make it, therefore, more interesting to me. And by the way, some of you also suggested that ideas should stand on their own, independent of the person who expresses that idea. Okay, that's probably true. Ideas are true in as much as they correspond with reality, okay? So a true idea, an absolutely true concept, is true no matter who says it or who denies it. But one of the reasons why we read biographies is because there is a strong correlation of interest between the person who holds the view and the view itself. Okay, this is why not only do we study Calvin's Institutes, but we also read biographies about John Calvin. This is why we read not only Edwards's Miscellanies, but we also read great biographies about Jonathan Edwards, because it's sometimes very hard to distinguish the person from the idea. And not only that, but we're interested in why this idea emerged. Perhaps I wildly disagree with the idea. Still, it would be helpful to me to know something about the background of my interlocutor with whom I disagree. Or perhaps I totally, completely agree with you. And by the way, I probably agree with a lot of your opinions. Some of you said you can't follow me anymore because I don't like anonymous accounts. I don't know what to say about that. We can certainly agree, even if we disagree on this particular topic, don't you think? Some of you, and I found this very, very interesting, you actually wrote me. Some of you sent messages to me, and you said that it hurt your feelings what I said about anonymous accounts. Well, now that's a great irony, isn't it? Because how could I possibly know I was hurting your feelings by saying anonymous accounts are stupid if I don't know who you are? Moreover, that seems to be something of a confusion in your own mind, because you're saying these things anonymously, and yet there's something in you that is hurt when I disagree with an anonymous account. I found that very unique. It was a unique kind of emotional expression on the part of some of you who said you were hurt by what I said. Now, let me give a second reason. So for me, of course, the great sin is just they're dull and boring. I have no interest in anonymous accounts for the most part. I am going to give some exceptions later. But secondly, there is the real thing about accountability, okay? One of the reasons why I prefer to follow, again, I'm not saying they should be illegal or that they're immoral necessarily, but one of the reasons that I follow people and not anonymous accounts is because I think largely Christians should be accountable for what they say, and that includes things that we say in private as well as things that we say in public. And so one of the reasons that I've chosen not to have any anonymous accounts is that I am accountable for the things that I say. In fact, I tell you who I am in every one of my videos. And if you go to my Twitter or my Facebook, you can find out where I go to church and what church I'm the pastor of and where I teach at seminary. I mean, there's a lot of information that you can find about me because I am accountable for the things that I say. And that is actually something that's quite true for me. Now, one of you commented that I'm just afraid of my own presbytery or something like that. Well, you know what? In a sense, you are actually right. And there have been times where brothers in my presbytery have held me to account about things that I've said on my videos. I have a lot of subscribers on this channel, and there's a lot of people who agree with me, a lot of people who disagree with me, and some people disagree with me very strenuously. So yes, I have had feedback from some of my colleagues before about the things that I've said. Sometimes they've urged me on, and sometimes they've said, restrain a little bit, hold back a little bit. But that public accountability definitely causes me to think twice about what I'm going to say, and especially what I'm going to say about someone else. All right. Now, I do think, and I strongly suspect, that some of the reason that a lot of you have anonymous accounts is that it eliminates the entire rubric of accountability from your life. You don't have to worry about it. Your elders aren't going to call you. Your fellow presbyters aren't going to call you. Your colleagues at the college, university, seminary, workplace, whatever it is, are not going to call you to account because they don't know who you are. I think that's probably a pretty poor motivation for having an anonymous account. If your main motive, and I'm not suggesting it's you, again, I don't even know who you are, but if your main motivation is to cut off any sort of accountability so you can say whatever you want about whoever you want, well, I think there probably is some moral implications there in that. Next, a lot of you said that your accounts were anonymous because you were afraid of Big Brother knowing who you are. And you mentioned something about big tech, or you mentioned something about the concerning strengthening power of centralized federal governments, with which I happen to agree with you, okay? But let me just break some hard news to you here. Big Brother already knows who's running Reformed Batman 123 on Twitter, okay? There is no sense in which posting a picture of a comic book character as your profile or coming up with some creative name from Star Wars, there is no sense in which that is actually a shield of anonymity for you from Big Brother. The technology already exists, and it is far beyond our own capacity to understand it, to figure out exactly who you are. If, for some reason, Big Tech or Big Gov wanted to crack down on you because of some of your opinions, as Luke Skywalker 72 or whatever on Twitter, they're going to do it no matter what. If that's actually your fear, you probably shouldn't be on social media at all. In that case, it'd probably be best to cut off yourself from as many forms of digital communication as possible, because I really don't think that a fake profile picture is going to provide a lot of cover for you. And not only that, but some of you are very concerned about doxing. Well, you know, you don't have to be afraid of doxing if you are who you are. My name is Matthew Everhard. There you go. I have no fear of people suddenly finding out who's behind my account. Not only that, but for some of you, if people actually found out who you were, maybe part of your fears, they would find out that you really don't have a lot going on for yourself and not a lot to lose. I don't mean to insult anybody, but one of you said that it's pastors and professors and politicians are the only ones who are able to speak out because they have nothing to lose. Well, actually, I want to completely disagree with that. It's pastors and professors and politicians who have everything to lose based on their opinions. If you are a person who works at, maybe you own your own business, maybe you're a plumber, maybe you have your own landscaping business. Well, I think that person probably has less to lose than somebody who could reasonably lose their job for voicing the opinions that they hold. And so a lot of you expressed a fear of cancellation because of your opinions. Well, again, maybe if there was some accountability for some of the things you said, maybe you wouldn't have to fear cancellation as much. Maybe it's some of the unrestrained speech, it's the ways that you talk about people slanderously that actually would bring about the cancellation. But I would totally disagree with the person who says that pastors are free to say whatever they want, or professors or politicians are the only people in society that can voice their opinions without any fear of being canceled. Actually, experience and history seems to suggest the opposite, that we do have very much to lose, and all the more reason why we should be very careful about the things we say. But at the same time, there must be some kind of risk that we exert in our attempt to influence our culture. And if cancellation is truly your fear, then probably there are a few things you should do to make yourself uncancelable, okay? If you're really afraid that you're going to lose your job because of some of the opinions you hold, it might be time to take some more radical steps towards financial independence. If you work for, let's just say, a very large corporation in which any sort of deviant political view on, let's say, gender or immigration or sexuality could get you fired, well, maybe you probably should think about setting yourself up a little differently so that you have more financial security and stability. man, my goodness, we certainly need plumbers in this country. We certainly need electricians in this country. We certainly need welders in this country. Maybe this is a cue then to go out and to try to start some kind of business for yourself that actually does contribute to society and makes you essentially unfireable and uncancelable because you are your own employer. Now, I know that would require a lot of major change for some of you. But for others of you, I trust you to calculate your own risk, okay? Some of you said, Matt, you just want us to risk everything and lose our jobs. No, that's not true. Why would I want that? I don't want you to lose your job. I don't want you to lose your house. I don't want you to lose your position in the university or in the company or in the hospital or whatever position or prerogative you have. I don't want you to lose anything. But you need to mitigate your own risk and make those kinds of calculations as to what kind of risk you're willing to sustain. I will simply say this, however. There is no such thing as courage without some implied risk, okay? So for those of you who think that you're being particularly brave in your anonymity, I suppose I disagree with that, because in as much as anonymity mitigates and removes risk, then therefore courage is likewise removed from the equation. It takes real courage to change a society that is crumbling as quickly as our society is crumbling. And some of you said that I should look back to Christian history about the way that Christians used anonymity for the sake of the gospel. And I would likewise say there are some people, though, in history that did risk quite a bit in order to not be anonymous. For instance, I could cite for you John Bunyan. Okay, John Bunyan at any time could have given up his right to preach, and yet he willingly sustained the repercussions of being a public preacher of the gospel. Because he considered the glory of Christ as greater than any consequences that could be imposed on him by the society in which he lived. And so some of us are willing to take more risk and others of us not so much. I'm not faulting you for that, but I am telling you that it's hard to be courageous if you don't take any risk at all. And that brings me to my next point. That is to say that if there is going to be any change in our society, we will have to give some kind of pushback, okay? We are seeing so many things erode in our society right now. Our rights, our freedoms. We are going in such a strange and crazy direction as it regards even our children and their rights and their protections. Listen, somebody has to speak out. And I really just in my heart do not believe that a bunch of online anonymous accounts are really going to win the day in these kinds of battles. It takes actual people to step up. It takes actual people to step forward. It takes real people with character and credibility to step forward. And maybe you're worried that the HR department is going to march into your office. Why don't you march into the HR department's office in force with many colleagues, many employees working together side by side by name and willing to put something on the line? I think that's the only way we're going to be able to give any press back or pushback in this crumbling society, is that if people step out in force, in mass, together with names and faces and reputations on the line saying, we will not give up. We will not do this. We will not let our rights be taken away from us in these ways. And if people don't do that, and this is the moment in which we have to step forward and press back against some of these hyper secularized, hyper demonized ideas in our culture today. If somebody doesn't press back, then it's going to be like a tidal wave that just washes over our entire culture, and we're going to see it disintegrate before our very eyes. Somebody has to press back. And my fear, again, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. My fear is that if everybody goes anonymous, if nobody speaks up, if nobody says anything, if nobody's willing to risk their own personal capital to preach back, to push back against the culture, then it's already over and we've already lost. This is definitely a moment for people to speak up and to speak out. Now, that's going to bring me to one of my last points here, and I am going to recommend a few accounts that I think are interesting here in just a minute. I want to speak for a moment a little bit more philosophically about the way that cultural change actually takes place in a society, okay? A lot of us like to think, and it would be all so easy, if just enough anonymous accounts could spring up, it would be sort of a grassroots change that pops up from the bottom down. Unfortunately, if you look at some of the philosophical literature on cultural change, it actually suggests the opposite, that cultural change in terms of ideation does typically take place from the top down. Typically. It usually takes place in the form of what we might call those who have a lot of cultural capital, who are influencers in our society. Now, when I say influencers, please don't think I mean like Instagram girls trying to influence what the new cool shoes are. That's not the kind of influencer that I'm talking about. But in his book, To Change the World, James Davison Hunter suggests that typically ideation, or the sea change of ideas, takes place from the elite downwards. Now, I know you're not going to like that, okay? Especially if you're more egalitarian in your mindset. But it's typically people who are in intellectual seats of position that do, in fact, disseminate the ideas that shape the culture. So again, just read To Change the World by Hunter. You're going to see, I think the case is pretty clear for the most part. Now that's not to preclude revival, okay? Obviously, revival takes place as a work of the Holy Spirit, and revival comes exactly when the Lord wills it to come. But the way most people are influenced is by those who have some kind of position to disseminate ideas more broadly to the culture. Okay, so let's think for a moment about what those positions may be. Well, obviously, university professors, seminary professors. And why would a seminary professor have more influence? Because they're teaching those who are going to be teaching the churches. And so their voice, their influence is somewhat magnified by their position. So too with people that are in legal positions, or company owners, corporation leaders. Politicians obviously are going to have a lot of say. They're going to have a lot of sway in terms of what a society believes. And of course, people in the media that have these sorts of galvanizing personalities. Now, you may not like that. You may say, I don't believe that. You may say that that theory of cultural change is bunk. Well, read To Change the World and come up with your own political philosophy or philosophical cultural ideology change theory, and I'll be glad to listen to it. But as far as I understand how societal change works, it is typically from people of the position of influence who can broadly disseminate their ideas to the largest group of thinkers as possible. And unfortunately, that does seem to come by way of the intellectual elite. So I can think of a negative example here, one example that none of us are going to like, and that would be the infiltration of Marxist ideas in our culture today. Well, there's no doubt, it seems to me, that Marxism is spreading like wildfire, and I think it's a very bad thing. I think it's damaging to any society, any culture. I think it's as bad as the devil himself, right? Where is that idea coming from? Well, it's coming from the universities, and those people who are being trained to take up positions of influence, leadership, power, people in legal professions, politicians, teachers in the public schools. They're learning these things from the universities as that idea seeps down into the culture. Okay, so here's my point. We as Christians ought to use whatever cultural capital we have for the sake of influence change. Okay, now you may not have much. You may be as I once was, the head cheeser at the pizza shop. That was actually a job that I had one time. I was the guy in charge of the cheese of the pizza. Okay, well, that's not a lot of cultural capital according to Hunter. But if I have 3 cheesers working underneath me, then my opinion does have some influential power for them. If I'm a teacher, I have some influence over the schools. If I'm a seminary professor, I have some influence over the pastors. If I'm a book writer, I have some influence over those people who read my books. And all of that goes to suggest that it is people in the positions of some sort of teaching or ideology disseminating influence who are actually going to be the ones who have more potential to change the culture than those who have less. So I can't think of somebody who would have less than an anonymous account who is indistinguishable from a bot. Okay, that's merely some kind of opinion that's floating around in the digital ether world that is not going to have a lot of cultural influence. Okay, now again, you can disagree with Hunter's theory, but that would be up to you to disprove it, and you're welcome to try. Now, as far as some anonymous accounts that I think are good or at least interesting on Twitter, Well, there's a bunch of them. Let me see if I can call some to mind here. Libs of TikTok was probably one that before Chaya Rachich was doxxed, very much influential, totally anonymous for the most part. I think it actually has gained power after she was doxxed, though, and that is an incredibly influential account because what it did was it put the ideas of liberals and progressives out for the world to actually have a look at and see. Okay. There's one called I/O, which does some very interesting research in terms of race and demographics and crime and intelligence ratios and things like that. Very interesting, highly controversial because it deals with race, and probably this account is more successful in that it is anonymous, because I do think it would be so controversial that it would probably incite some form of violence if people knew who the progenitor of that account was. The rabbit hole is an interesting one. Oh, there's one called Protestia, which has a lot of craziness, that happens in the churches. There's a lot of things that I've used for this channel that I've got from Protestia. Whoever the person behind that account is doing a pretty good job, in my opinion. Defiant L's, this is just from the top of my mind here, has some really ironic tweets in which people totally contradict themselves in hilarious ways. Woke Preacher Clips, or Woke Preacher TV, is a very interesting account. It's anonymous because it shows a lot of insanity and a lot of the woke preaching in pulpits today. That's a very interesting one. Gosh, there's other ones. Smash Bales has some interesting stuff. I agree a lot of times, sometimes I don't, but that's kind of the point, right? I mean, anonymous accounts can be interesting, but they tend to be the ones that work very, very hard to dig up information, that have to go through dozens of hours of video to find a clip that's interesting enough. Some people are putting in some really hard research into the scientific papers and bringing that forward. But the kind of repeater anonymous accounts where they're just kind of hashing through other people's already publicly disclosed opinions, those again are probably the least important to me and the least influential. Okay, so just to sum up here, I'm totally in favor of your freedom to have anonymous accounts. No, I'm not part of the Fed or DHS because I said you should say who you are. But I do think you would probably have more influence on society more broadly if you would use whatever cultural capital you have to try to push back against the culture that is. One more thought just creeped into my mind right now. Suppose you have no cultural capital, and that may very well be the case for a lot of the anonymous accounts that follow me or that watch this channel. You say, I don't have anything interesting to put in my bio, therefore I don't put anything in my bio. That, my friend, is your problem. If your life is so disinteresting that you have nothing interesting to say about yourself, there is nothing interesting about your resume or your background or your credibility, that's a you problem. That's not a Matthew Everhard problem. You need to go out and fix that, okay? If you are 35 years old and your vocation is you're an online gamer and you still sleep in your parents' basement and you've got your Star Wars sheets and you collect comic books or something like that, and you just don't want to admit that because it's lame, that's a you problem. Go out and do something to make yourself more interesting, and therefore, at least to me, your opinions will be more interesting as well. All right, well, hopefully that clarifies my opinion on anonymous accounts. I may have gotten myself into more trouble even by clarifying, but nevertheless, I think what I think. Like me, love me, reject me, whatever you want to do. It's a big world out there. All right, thanks for checking in. I do love you lots. We'll talk to you later.